Hello, welcome to Culture TV. In this video, we'll be mainly looking at the declension of adjectives, with plenty of good examples to help you understand this quite difficult topic. So stay tuned. So this is lesson 54 of our online program, Let's Speak Russian. And yes, this is part 6 on cases, and it will also be our last video on this grammar topic. We won't be doing any more. But I hope that you understand that this is not where Russian grammar finishes. There is still a lot to learn. There is more to come with cases. Not that much really. You already have a great solid foundation. You know lots about cases. And really, now that I'm thinking about it, you only really need to now just get used to the exceptions, some other little rules here and there, but then it's just a matter of practice, regular practice and effective practice as well. I do say it all the time, but seriously, it is really important. So I'm going to leave that with you. Okay, so before we start looking at adjective declension, I just want to give you a reminder of pronoun declension. Now I'm showing you this table again, and there are two possible reactions. You are either completely fed up with this and you're very annoyed and you don't want to go through this again, which is great, which means that you've learned this and you can use it well, which is what I'm looking for. However, if you are a little bit rusty on this, then do make sure that you are practicing regularly. Okay, here we go. If you need to, pause the video as always, and let's just go through this once more. We know everything in the nominative case, so that's fine. Now in the accusative. Меня, тебя, его, ее, нас, вас, их. Dative. Мне, тебе, ему, ей, нам, вам, им. In the genitive. Меня, тебя, его, ее, нас, вас, их. Instrumental. Мной, тобой, им, ей, нами, вами, ими. Prepositional. Мне, тебе, нем, ней, нас, вас, них. Now please don't forget about noun declension either. Here are all the rules that we have learned so far over the last few lessons on cases. Yes, there are loads of them. However, as I proposed to you in lesson 41, there is no need to memorize them. You can either use the method that I suggested, or alternatively use something that you know works for you and is effective as well. Okay, now on to the topic of today's lesson, which is, of course, adjective declension. Just again to remind you, it's not just nouns and pronouns, but also adjectives that get affected by case. They also get declined. Now, this next rule is just common sense, really, but I'll let you know anyway. Adjectives are always in the same case as the noun that they're describing, very evidently. Otherwise, it would just be a mess completely. So just a few examples of what adjective declension actually means. So here I've got a little noun phrase. Вкусное яблоко. Вкусное яблоко. Вкусный in masculine form means tasty or nice rather. So you can describe something as nice in English when you talk about food. In Russian you have to say this. You have to use this adjective. Вкусный or вкусное if it's neuter because a яблоко, an apple, is neuter. And yes, Russians will use this word all the time. Let's say if you go to a столовая or any other restaurant, all the vocabulary for that, by the way, is in the previous lesson. Do check that out as well. If somebody asks you about the food, you can say вкусно, мне понравилось, мне очень нравится, things like that. You know all these phrases already. So yes, just pay attention there. I use the adverb. We use the adverb in Russian, вкусно. If you're describing how something tastes, yeah? But anyway, I'm digressing here. Let's have a look at what happens if we want to start declining this noun phrase. So let's say I want to decline яблоко in the accusative. Well, actually, nothing is going to happen because if you remember, masculine and neuter inanimate nouns don't change in the accusative, and therefore the adjective doesn't either. Makes sense, doesn't it? So an example, Я вижу вкусное яблоко. Я вижу вкусное яблоко. I see a nice apple. Yes, because the verb видеть, to see, triggers the accusative case. Or maybe if you want to say that there is no apple, if there is an absence of something, what case do we need to use? Correct, it's the genitive. So we would have здесь нет вкусного яблока. Здесь нет вкусного яблока. There we go. Now hopefully you can see that our ending for both the noun and the adjective has changed. We've performed a declension. Яблоко has changed to яблоко. Now pronunciation doesn't differ because of the stress obviously, but if we look at the adjective вкусного, that is now different to show that the apple is in the genitive case. And just again to remind you, the letter G, very often when it's between two vowels, it will be pronounced as a V. So yes, I could just show you the whole table and again ask you to memorize it. That is not productive at all, I don't think. So we'll go through each of the cases one by one with plenty of good examples so that you can understand. We'll start off with the accusative and let's take any adjective, for example, красивый. And yes, we'll be starting with the masculine. And if we want to now decline красивый, just again to remind you, y ending means that it is describing a masculine noun. It stays the same in the accusative, also красивый, as we've just said regarding whether something is animate or not. However, as you should remember, hopefully in feminine, if you have a feminine noun, then that is not the case. You have to perform a declension. So красивая, this time we're making an agreement, yes, красивая, that becomes красивую, красивую, like that, красивую. And if it's neuter, again like masculine, nothing happens. Красивая or yeah, ending for neuter, stays the same, красивая. There is the rule just again so that you don't forget. Okay, just a few sentences to support all of this. Я вижу большой дом. I see a large house. Houses aren't alive, so we keep it as it is. Я видел новую школу. Я видел новую школу. I saw the new school. Yes, школа is a school. In the accusative, a changes to o, so we get школу. And we also have to change the adjective describing the school, so it becomes новую. Я видел новую школу. I saw, so the past tense we have here. The imperfect past tense, actually. I'll just mention a few things about aspect in a moment. Just this one last example sentence. Она смотрела интересное видео. Она смотрела интересное видео. I'm sure you can guess what this means. Video is, of course, a video. Интересный, in its dictionary form, means interesting. We have to make it agree with the noun, so it's интересное. And then she watched, also in the imperfect tense. Смотреть is to watch. Now, what I wanted to mention about aspect, just a bit of a side note, I know I'm going off track, but I think it's a good point to mention this, is that, well, first of all, some verbs, well, I say uniquely, but they use a different aspect to the one you would expect to use. So in English, whenever we would, for example, say, I did something, or if somebody asks you, will you do something, you would kind of expect to use the perfective in Russian. Yes, usually that's right. However, as I'm saying, there are a few verbs who don't really obey this rule. Well, it's not really a rule, is it? It's just, well, it's not a rule because aspect and tense are two different things, really, but anyway. And then sometimes the use of the imperfective doesn't actually imply continuous or frequent action. So some verbs are in the imperfective, but they don't actually mean that something is going on for a long time or it's continuous or whatever the imperfective conveys, right? So yeah, just a few examples from the previous slide. Я смотрел видео. So because we're using the imperfective here, the translation of this really is I was watching a video. But then we also have Я посмотрел видео. That means I watched a video. In Russian, and uniquely to this verb to watch, these two phrases kind of mean the same thing. Despite them meaning two different aspects, the meaning is the same, almost. If you say Я посмотрел, you are really emphasizing that you've watched the whole video, and you are probably not going to watch it again, or you've gained a result from it. You've learned something from it. You got something out of it. Whilst if you say Я смотрел, usually the imperfective would not convey that, but in this case it can. So you can say either is what I'm saying here, but not with all verbs. In fact, most verbs, there are exceptions. That is what I'm saying. Another example, if you were to ask someone, Ты читала газету? Ты читала газету? Did you read the newspaper? Or rather, the better translation here is, were you reading the newspaper? However, if you were to use the perfective, Ты прочитала газету? Ты прочитала газету? That's the perfective, did you read the newspaper? Now, there is a fundamental difference here. And читала means like, have you been reading it? Yes? Whilst if you say Ты прочитала, that means you've finished reading the newspaper, you've read all of it, every single page, probably, and now you no longer need the newspaper. So whoever is asking this question can now borrow the newspaper to read, because the other person is done with it. Whilst if you say Я читала or Я читал, if you're male, then you're not really conveying that you've got something out of it, there is a result. You might be using it again, you've had a brief look at it, you've glanced over it, but you haven't fully read it, if you know what I mean. So that is one other example. And this really just illustrates that there are, of course, rules in grammar, but they're not solid or rigid, and you have to be careful that there might be sometimes be many exceptions. And I just don't want you to get surprised, really, because I'll be showing you more example sentences, and they'll start defying the rules that I've been telling you before, and you'll start, wondering and questioning my teaching and what on earth am I saying. But in fact, this is just what the Russian language is like. Anyway, that is like a proper steep tangent that we've gone on. Let's carry on with declension, and we'll go on to the dative case. By the way, any questions regarding that aspect, do remember to put them below or send us an email. Right, yes, dative case declension. We'll take another masculine adjective, for example, новый. Новый, which means new. In the dative case, the ending will change and it will become новому. Новому. Okay? Just pay attention to the pronunciation. Even though there is a letter or there in the ending or mu, I am pronouncing it as новому. Yes, so it's an R because it's reduced, because it's the first or новому that is stressed. Okay? I'm not going to say that from now on, just how do you say this? Tune your ears, we'll say. For feminine, новая becomes новый. Новый. And then for neuter, новое becomes новому. Новому. Same as masculine. A few sentences. Он позвонил новому соседу. Он позвонил новому соседу. Звонить, позвонить, that pair of verbs means to call or phone up. Позвонить, there we go, another example just very quickly of the perfective. Позвонить, that means you actually phoned someone up and you had a chat with them and you found out what you wanted to find out. Whilst if you just say я звонил, that means that you phoned them up, you dialed them up, but maybe they didn't even answer. Or you tried phoning them up on multiple occasions, or potentially, yes, you spoke to them on multiple occasions. But if you say я позвонил, that means you phoned them up once, you had a conversation, and there was a result. Okay. So yeah, I phoned up, and then I was phoning up. Do you see the difference? Right, hopefully that's a yes. Anyway, let's carry on. Новому соседу. So звонить requires the dative, so новому соседу. Okay? Мы помогли старой бабушке. Мы помогли старой бабушке. We helped out an old lady. Кот прошел по новому пианино. Кот прошел по новому пианино. The cat walked along the new piano. I do have to say that thinking of a few example sentences wasn't easy for this one. But this is just what I thought of. You know those cats who happen to just walk over the piano and make some noise. That's just what I imagined, really. So yeah, pianina is neuter, so it's новому. Okay, next case is, of course, the genitive. Another example adjective will say добрый. Добрый, and this means kind, so a kind person. In the masculine, that becomes доброго. Доброго. Okay, again, that same pronunciation with g becoming v. Okay, доброго. For feminine, добрая becomes добрый. Добрый. And lastly, for neuter, доброе, same as masculine, доброго. A few examples then. Я стояла около нового дома. Я стояла около нового дома. Okay, here's a great example with prepositions, and I hope you remember from lesson 45 that all prepositions require their own specific case, or cases, depending on the context, after them. So in this case, около, which means near, as you can see, triggers the genitive. So, я стояла, this means a female speaker was standing by the new house. Я стояла около нового дома. Next sentence. Он приехал из маленькой деревни. Он приехал из маленькой деревни. He arrived, or he came from, a small village. Again, is a preposition which means from or out of, and then a small village. Деревня becomes деревни, and then we decline the adjective as well. Маленькая деревня is a small village, and then here is the declension. And lastly, там нет красивого озера. Там нет красивого озера. There is no beautiful lake over there. What a shame. Right, now let's go on to the instrumental case. We'll take another adjective, веселый. Веселый. And this is something like happy or joyful. Again, you can also describe a person as being joyful, really happy with their life. In the masculine, that will become веселым. Веселым. Okay? Then for feminine, веселая becomes веселый. Веселый. And lastly, for neuter, it follows the same rules as masculine. I think you're spotting a pattern now. Веселым. Веселым. Это было обещано новым президентом. Это было обещано новым президентом. Now, you're probably starting to see that I'm giving you quite difficult and challenging example sentences, really, when I should be giving you simple ones. Unfortunately, when we start getting to topics like this, I can't avoid jumping up a level of difficulty, really, because, well, with the instrumental case, as I think I mentioned in lesson 44, we also use it to form the passive voice. So when an action is being done by someone, so you put the subject at the end of the sentence. And this is exactly what we have here. So let's break it down. Это было обещано. Обещано comes from the verb обещать, which means to promise. Now this is a part of speech that we haven't seen yet. It is kind of like a past participle, but not really. It's used only with this passive voice formation. So this was promised. And then by is conveyed through the instrumental case, новым, new, and then I'm sure you can guess president. So this was promised by the new president, okay? Он пил чай с вкусной булочкой. Он пил чай с вкусной булочкой. He drank or he was drinking tea with a nice, i.e. tasty, bun. Булочка is a bun. Again, that was from the previous lesson. So in Russian, the culture of supper or afternoon tea, or even, what's it called now, elevenses, people tend to drink tea or coffee with something, usually булочка, so a bun. It could be just bread, it could be biscuits or things like that, but nothing too substantial, really, just a little snack. And yes, most commonly this is with a bun. And so that's a phrase in Russian, pить чай, and then with something, yeah? So if someone asks you, would you like to drink tea, it usually means, would you like something else with it as well? Then we have птица летела над красивым озером. Птица летела над красивым озером. The bird was flying over the beautiful lake. Over, над, and then this preposition also triggers the instrumental, okay? We haven't seen this motion verb to fly, лететь, just yet, but we will do very soon. Okay, and lastly we have the prepositional case. And just one other adjective in the masculine will have важный, важный. And this means important. We have seen this already. In the masculine, that will become важным, важным. In the feminine, that will be важный, важный. And then neuter, важное becomes важным, just like masculine. Она живет в большом доме. Она живет в большом доме. She lives in a large house. She lives there. So we're really talking about a stationary, permanent, or constant action. So we are going to use the prepositional case in this context very clearly. And only one other example. Они думали о чем-то очень важном. Они думали о чем-то очень важном. They were thinking, and then or is about. Now then we have this strange чем-то. What does this mean? Well, if you recall from lesson 25, we saw all of those words like something, anything, anywhere, nowhere, and we saw что-то, which means something. It can also mean anything. Now, just like the question words who and what get declined, all these little words also do. And so что-то has to become чем-то, чем-то, if it's used in the prepositional case, okay? And then очень, very, важным, о чем-то важном. The adjective is still describing the something, чем-то, so it is of course also declined. Now an important point to note here is that all these words, something, anything, and so on, are always neuter in Russian, okay? And so that's why the declension is важным. So that is it in terms of all the declensions. Now I'm going to show you the table, because after all this can help you organize all the learning you've just done, and I appreciate that many of you find this just a better way to visualize everything. And so here we go, here it is. We'll have gender and case, masculine, feminine, neuter. In the nominative, î, aya, oya. In the accusative, stays the same apart from feminine, which goes to uyu. Dative, omu, oi, omu. Genitive, ovo, oi, ovo. Instrumental, oi, Prepositional, oi, It's really not that hard, is it? Because if you spotted the patterns already, you can see that for feminine, in 4 cases, it is always oi. That's great. Masculine and neuter are all the same pretty much, apart from the nominative and accusative. So yeah, not that much learning to do really, it's just practice. And one thing to note is that, yes, if you are going to talk about masculine and neuter nouns which are animate, to really make that clear that something is alive, and usually this is mainly names. So if you want to talk about a person, of course people have names. Just to make it clear that this person is alive, you will use the genitive case endings. Okay, so in an accusative case scenario, just use the genitive case endings for live, masculine and neuter nouns. Okay. Now, I have to say this to you that this is not the full version of the table. There are a few other rules, and they are mainly to do with spelling. So here is the full table. There is quite a lot, yes. I've also added on the plural column, and we haven't looked at that in this lesson. But to be honest, really, you can just apply the principle, just change the endings, and it will be the same. You can probably do that in your own time. I think if you have any problems, as always, just ask in the comments. So what are all these endings below then? Well, it all depends on the preceding letter. So on the last letter of the stem of the adjective, okay? And in Russian, there are a few spelling rules that ideally you are aware of, but you don't have to be just yet. Things like hard and soft consonants and all the spelling rules. We have seen a few of them. For example, you cannot write the letter Ö after J and Sh. And so, for example, if we take the instrumental, which has if the masculine adjective ends in Sh, the stem, ends in Sh, like большой, right? You will not write for большим. Even though we pronounce it большим, we can't write the it's just orthography. So you write I instead. And so that is why this is kind of like the second rule in brackets, all depending on the letter before. And it's the same principle for everything else, all depending on what letter is before. So it's just spelling, nothing else, nothing grammar related at all. We've seen all the grammar already. So just to give you a few examples with these rules, I'm going to give you some last few example sentences. So here we go. Она гуляла с лучшей подругой. Она гуляла с лучшей подругой. She went for a walk with her best female friend. Подруга is a female friend, and it can be of anyone. It's just that by adding the по at the start, you are distinguishing between gender. And then лучший, as you should know, is best. We've seen comparatives and superlatives in lesson 46. Again, because it's a sh, you wouldn't write a unstressed or there. So you have to write a ye. And that's just another spelling rule. And then гулять means to go for a walk or have a walk. У него много хороших друзей. У него много хороших друзей. So as you can see, we have a quantity word here, много, which means many. So therefore, what does that mean about the remainder of the sentence? Yes, it's going to be in the genitive case. So whenever we have a quantity word or whenever we have an absence of something, we use the genitive. So у него means he has many good friends. Хороших друзей. Друзья on its own in nominative is irregular already, and it is also irregular in the genitive. Хороших, now notice we write ich. Usually it would be ich. But because sh is one of those consonants after which we cannot write we have to write I. That's why it's хороших. Okay? Very good phrase here in both Russian and English. В последнюю минуту. В последнюю минуту. Which means last minute or at the last minute. Yes? Now again, we have a soft consonant here, n. Now I'm not expecting you to know this, but this is just the rule that n is soft, and therefore we have to write you instead of you. Okay, so just remember the phrase really, and that will probably be good already. So yes, last minute. Then we have в магазине нет свежей выпечки. В магазине нет свежей выпечки. And here's an example where we have two cases in how many words? 5. Two cases in 5 words. So, в магазине, in the shop, because we're inside it and we're talking about what is inside the shop, so not moving into the shop, but what is there already, we're using the prepositional. Then нет means no, so therefore the next part of the sentence is going to be in the genitive. Свежей выпечки. So what is absent in this shop then? Well, if you remember from the last lesson, wypieczka is baked goods. So there are no fresh baked goods at the shop, unfortunately. Usually there are, but as I said, do check with the staff at the shop whether what you're buying is fresh or not. Anyway, the next few words, very useful. These are, well, discourse markers, really, we should describe them as. Во-первых, во-вторых, в-третьих. Во-первых, во-вторых, в-третьих. Firstly, secondly, thirdly, and if you wanted to, you could carry on, and fourthly and fifthly and so on, even though we don't say that in English. In Russian, you can, really. So what is wrong with третьих here? Well, not wrong, but what is different, sorry. Ugh is fine with the first two because of the consonant, but because we have a soft sign with третьих, we have to put the E. Again, just spelling. And one other thing, as you can see, we have vor at the start of the first two. I did mention in lesson 45 that sometimes, just to make it flow better, just that it sounds nice, we put the letter or, so that we're not saying во-вторых, but во-вторых, okay? It's just the way the Russian language has evolved, really. And lastly for today, я горжусь вашей работой. Я горжусь вашей работой. Гордиться, as you hopefully should have identified, is a reflexive verb and it means to be proud. Then, as you can see, the adjective declensions work not just for adjectives themselves, but also possessive adjectives. So ваши means your, and the rules are actually very similar. There is a whole separate table for them. I might show you it at some point, I might not, but you know, the rules are very similar. Вашей работой. So I am proud of your work. And that is very true. I myself indeed am extremely proud of the work that you are doing, of all your effort. If you're watching up to this point, that means you've done lots of work already. So thank you very much for that. You're doing extremely well. And that is it for today's lesson, really. Of course, as I say, there are other rules, but these are the main ones. Now, I do appreciate this lesson was very long. It's probably one of the longest of the whole course, but as I said, it is also one of the hardest. So yes, rewatch this as many times as you need. Always, you are free and welcome to ask any questions you like at all. All the details for that are below. So yes, that is it for today. Thank you very much for your attention. See you next time. Goodbye.